Hey, what's up guys, it's Chili here, and if you clicked on this video, my hats are off to you because you just clicked on a 2-hour long video of a fan concept. Why would you do that? If you know me, you might be familiar with my Age of Empires 4 concepts. I've made a ton of those, and this is my first time attempting an Age of Mythology concept, which turned out to be a lot more work because there's so much more going on in the designs of the AOM civs. Honestly, I just started yapping and somehow I reached 2 hours before I knew it. So look, if you just want to see the concept graphic, you just want to read it yourself, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find my post on Reddit, and you can see all of these images yourself. You can even download the PDF and read it in full detail. You don't have to listen to me for 2 hours to explain this. But if you are interested in a more in-depth explanation, I would love for you to join me as I talk about how I would design the Chinese civilization in Age of Mythology Retold. And without further ado, let's just get into it. First off, I want to point out the artwork here. This is the 3 major gods that I've assembled for the Chinese civilization. I tried to make a portrait in the same style of the existing games, so the existing portraits. So you can see for each of these civilizations here, we have the Norse with this kind of like Aurora Borealis effect on the sides. We have the Atlanteans with this kind of like galaxy effect. The Egyptians have like a sandy effect, and the Greeks have this kind of like shining light and lightning effect. So for the Chinese, I tried to copy this same style and added this kind of cloudy effect to be the Chinese theming, and I added these Tianzi mountains in the background here, which I think are very iconic for just like China in general, or the Chinese countryside. It's also very evocative of kind of like the mythological era in China. So I felt like it was a good fit here. Yeah, hopefully you guys didn't get baited too hard with the artwork here. It's not official artwork. This is just purely just something I made as a fan. I want to give a shout out to all the artists I included here. I just found these off of Google. The background art here with the Tianzi Mountains is originally made by Siba Prasad Maharana. The major god portraits, we're going to do a brief preview of all the concepts I have for the gods here, but the Yu Huang, the Jade Emperor, is the first major god. This art is by Kajia Wang. Yan Luo, the Judge of the Underworld, is an art that I could not quite find, but I thought it was such a cool piece. It's got the black and white permanences in the sides here. It's just such an evocative piece for what King Yama should look like. I thought I had to include it here. I'm guessing this is from like a Chinese game or something like that, but I couldn't find the original artwork. And then lastly, Nuwa. She's the goddess of creation, and this art is by Daniel Ivanova. Daniel Livanova, and I think I saw him post this on Reddit. So excellent art here, absolutely beautiful representation of Nuwa, and I just felt like it fit the game so well I had to represent it here. Again, huge shout out to all the artists here. So I want to give a little bit of a foreword before I get into all the nuances of this design. I'll just kind of read through it real quick and we'll kind of go over it. By the way, if you want to engage in the discussion with this concept, I will be posting this to Reddit, the AOM subreddit, the Age of Mythology subreddit, and I also am open. I read all the comments in this video, so if you have any thoughts, I absolutely want to hear it. These concept videos are purely just something I do for fun that I want to engage with the community on, and hopefully also give some potential ideas to the developers and the designers for Age of Mythology. Maybe they can add something similar. I know that a lot of times, like certain designs, having worked in major game studios, some of the designs like maybe aren't something that you can actually push forward without any validation from the audience. So maybe in doing this kind of video, we can create some validation for certain directions that they can take the Chinese civilization, and maybe that can affect the design in some way. So let's get into the forward here. Hey, it's Chili. Welcome to my fan concept. As a Chinese-American game developer, I've been wanting to see China represented in Age of Mythology ever since I was a kid. While the extended edition did include a Chinese civ, I did not feel it quite captured the essence of the stories that I grew up with. My hope is that this concept can serve as an inspiration to the devs for the upcoming China DLC civilization for AOM Retold. So as everyone already kind of knows, if you've been keeping track of the AOM Retold news, 2 DLC civs have been announced. So upon release, AOM Retold will have the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Norse, and the Atlanteans, all the civilizations in the base version of the original game. But then they will be adding, they've already confirmed at least one DLC civilization, which is China, and they've also confirmed a second DLC civilization civilization, though we don't know exactly what it is just yet. My guess, if I had to put money on it, would probably be the Aztecs. There was a very prominent mod for the that added the Aztecs to the original Age of Mythology, and I think that mod was received very well. It had a lot of really great ideas in there, so huge shout out to the modding team there. I think the Aztecs just make so much sense. It's such a colorful civilization. I would love to see it represented in this game. Some other ones that might be prominent would be like maybe like a Persian civilization or like Japan. I'm myself partial to like a Celtic style civilization, maybe in like an Arthurian mix kind of mythology. I think that would be super cool. But I won't get into too much speculating there. I think there's some other creators also talking about that, and I'm sure there's a lot of active discussion there. Moving on to the next paragraph here, Chinese mythology is very complex. It does not have one clear pantheon like you get with the Greeks of Mount Olympus or the Norse gods, for instance. There's over 4,000 years of recorded history and dozens of world religions, so it's fair to say that translating Chinese mythology to an AOM model has been a wonderful challenge, and I'm sure many of my choices here will be very controversial, and I welcome the debate. Again, that's the whole point of doing this kind of video, is basically to engage with you guys and talk with you guys, like, what do you guys think the Chinese should have? Do you think my ideas are really stupid, or do you think there's like some things here that could potentially work for civilization in the game? And I also want to call out that, like, of the many world religions that are operating within China today, historically there were, I would say, like about 4-ish that were really prominent. We first got like legalism, then Taoism, Confucianism, and then later on Buddhism. So you see all of these kinds of philosophies and religions kind of permeating throughout Chinese society, not to mention like Christianity and Islam that came a little bit later. So there's a lot of like influences here going on. China's been a very much a world player for most of its history, as one of, like, I would argue, like the main axes of world civilization, especially in Eurasia. And you know, there's been a lot of cross-cultural contact, especially with India through Silk Road trade, or even over the water. So it makes sense that there's going to be a lot of different influences here. For me, AOM has always been about pop mythology. I mean, if you can think about it, there's Horned Vikings in the game. We have Atlanteans. We even have like Scorpion Men, which is just inspired by that movie. So it makes sense that the design choices here that I made are meant to reflect kind of pop mythology. I prioritize gods and characters that are popularly known to both Eastern and Western audiences, and I consulted my friends and family to figure out which of these characters would be the most recognizable. The goal here is to draw on the nostalgia of Chinese mythology rather than be textbook accurate. This meant drawing primarily from the Taoist pantheon, as their figures are more widely known, especially for Westerners. So I have to admit here, I am coming at this from a Western perspective. I'm Chinese American, but I'm definitely more American than I am Chinese. So I want to respect the culture as much as I can here, but I don't also want to make a game that's meant to be like just purely educational, or make a design that's meant to be purely educational for Chinese mythology. Rather, I want to draw on things that are popular in the hopes that, like, you know, the people can kind of recognize it, and if people can recognize it, then it'll sell better and hopefully get more people interested in this mythology in the first place. I think that's kind of what AOM has always been about. I know for myself, like, I got really attracted to what I saw. I saw the Cyclopses and the Minotaurs. Like, I've heard of those things, and just like through pop mythology, I've heard of like Hercules, for instance, and I like seeing like the hoplite helmets, and it got me interested in like seeing like all these interesting designs, and that's what made me learn history and read into the mythology a little bit deeper. Hopefully the same thing can happen for Chinese mythology, and I felt like the existing extended edition version of the Chinese pantheon just wasn't quite there. There were a lot of like choices that were perhaps more accurate. For instance, the choice of making the three major gods the three sovereigns in Chinese mythology, which were kind of like the three original creator deities in Chinese mythology. That like makes sense because they're kind of like a trinity, and there's not really like another trinity kind of figure in Chinese mythology. So I get what they were doing. It's very accurate, but at the same time, it didn't really tell a story. Like Shen Nong and Fuxi and Nuwa are not necessarily seen as kind of like the top figures, the big players in Chinese mythology on a popular level, even if they are accurately the top figures. So going into this pop mythology, Journey to the West, definitely one of the biggest works of Chinese mythology in the world. It's been heavily popularized in the West as well now. This is a book where Sun Wukong is from, the Monkey King. It is the inspirational anchor of this design. I was also heavily influenced by Romance of the Three Kingdoms, that's what Dynasty Warriors is based on, and Investiture of the Gods. This is relatively lesser known in the West, but also one of the main stories about Chinese creation. It's about the fall of the Shang dynasty, and pretty pivotal to the story of Chinese civilization, at least, and it's very popular in China at least. These stories have been represented to wide acclaim in modern film and TV media, including with Journey to the West from 1986. This is the very popular one with a really banging soundtrack. I highly recommend you guys give a listen to that. Red Cliff from 2008. This was also a very popular movie about the Battle of Chibi from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Not the best movie in my opinion, but definitely a popular work that a lot of people in China will be familiar with. And Creation of the Gods, which is based on Investiture of the Gods. This was from 2023. Actually a pretty good movie. China's really upped their game when it comes to creating these kinds of like historical epics. I highly recommend you guys watch that one. They have also been featured in Japanese animation and games like with Dragon Ball and Dynasty Warriors. Dragon Ball in particular is heavily based off of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, so there's a lot of parallels over there. Chinese animation has also been on a bit of a renaissance lately, focusing on mythological stories like Whitesnake from 2019, Ne Zha from 2019, Zhang Ziya from 2020, and Yang Jian from 2023. For games, I took heavy inspiration from Smite, Honor of Kings, and of course previous Age of Empires titles. A lot of Age of Empires titles have already included the Chinese civilization, so you're going to see a lot of influence there. Smite is also probably one of the biggest games, especially in the West, when it comes to displaying Chinese mythology, so you're going to see a lot of inspiration from that one as well. And lastly, I want to call out Black Myth Wukong. This is an upcoming Souls-like with beautiful representations of Chinese mythological creatures. I'm definitely keeping my eye on this one. This looks really beautiful, and I have a feeling that especially if this game is going to be even a fraction of, is going to see even a fraction of the success that Elden Ring has seen. I have a feeling that a lot of people in the West are going to become more and more familiar with Chinese mythology because of this game, so that's really cool. In short, there's a lot of popular stories and recognizable characters to draw from here with significant appeal to modern audiences. So this is going to be, you're going to see this kind of thinking influence the rest of this design. So why don't we get into the overview real quick. I won't get too into detail here with just reading the overview. This is just to give you guys a brief idea, and then we'll get into the exact details in a moment. I'll go over absolutely everything that I'm saying over here, but real quick, I'll just read over this. Overview. The Chinese are a colorful civilization with an emphasis on smart base planning. So this civilization is all about building out your base, very similar to the Egyptians in that sense, where they're a little bit more booming focused and not as rush or military focused as the Norse are. They have unique heroes that will buff their cheap spammable military units, and their pantheon draws primarily from Taoist inspired pop mythology such as Journey to the West and Investiture of the Gods. So this hero mechanic here, actually I'll get into it right here. Heroes. Worshipping a god will unlock a unique hero. So every single civilization in Age of Mythology has a different kind of hero mechanic, and this just to give you guys a little bit more context, like it took a while actually for me to like figure out like what were all of the different things that were unique across every single civilization. One of the things is heroes, so that's where we're going to start. So for instance, the Egyptians have the like priest and the pharaoh. The Greeks have like their named heroes that are associated with a major god that you unlock in each age. The Norse have the Herseer and now the Godi, and the Atlanteans have regular units that can be upgraded to heroes. So every single civilization has a different way to do the hero mechanic. For the Chinese, I'm making it so that every single god, every single minor god, and as well as major god, will have an associated unique hero. And when you worship that god, you will unlock this unique hero. And then on top of that, I want to add this aura buff mechanic. So every single hero is going to be associated with a particular unit type. So as an example, you're going to see a unit called Guandao, which is this kind of like very similar to the Palace Guard from AoE 4. It's this elite heavy infantry wielding this like crescent moon blade halberd thing. This is very evocative of Guan Yu, so it makes a ton of sense that Guan Yu, if Guan Yu is around his Guandaos, he's going to be buffing them. The idea behind this is taken from the extended editions version of China, where they had the general unit, which was kind of like a support unit that does a little bit of Arcanto Scream that buffs all the units around it. I wanted to do a little bit more with that because across Chinese history, across a lot of stories in Asia actually, there's just more of an emphasis not on individual soldiers, but rather individual generals. Most of the history is told through the doings of the generals and their achievements, and it's almost implied if you read the histories that like the general themselves like won the battle single-handedly almost. And this is taken to an extreme in games like Dynasty Warriors, where you see like, you know, a single you basically operate as a single general, and you just go out there and you slaughter thousands of individual men, and you can just do that, and basically the common foot soldier is almost like no contest for you. So this is kind of meant to like evoke that the heroes are the leaders of these relatively spammable units. If killed, heroes will need to be revived, just like in the campaign. So this is very similar to the explorers from Age of Empires 3, where the hero will fall and they'll kind of be clutching their knee on the ground until you come back later and pick them up again. So I felt like that's going to add a little bit more of an interesting gameplay mechanic, but I'm also open to changing that up, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Every single major god will start with a unique scout hero in Age 1. So the scouting is another unique thing that's different across every single civilization. The Greeks have the I think it's called the Kataskopos. The Egyptians have the obelisk that the priests can plant. The Atlanteans have the oracles, and the Norse start with an Ulfsark, or rather a berserk now. So everyone does scouting a little bit differently. For the Chinese, I was thinking that they would start with a scout hero, and we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Favor is from social harmony. Buildings will accumulate favor as they work. So this is also very different from every other civilization. Again, the Greeks, they pray at the temple for their favor. The Egyptians have the monuments, the Atlanteans have the oracles, and the Norse fight for their favor. So for the Chinese, it's all about their buildings. I want to emphasize that China is a civilization that's centered around their architecture. Your villagers can then be tasked to gather this favor like it's a resource. So a little bit of a mix almost between like the Egyptians and the Greeks in that sense. For the economy of the Chinese, commoners are going to be their villagers. They have faster build speed but less gathering speed. Imperial officials are really interesting. They're basically like the prelates from AoE 4. They will buff nearby commoners one at a time, and that buff will decay over 30 seconds. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. The supply office is going to be China's unique resource drop-off point. This is the same thing that we saw in the extended edition. It used to be called the supply depot. I'm just calling it the supply office just because supply depots reminds me of StarCraft a little bit too much, but it functionally does the same exact thing. It's a universal drop-off point, and it's going to be a little bit more expensive compared to other civilizations' drop-off points. This means, as China, you have to think really carefully about where you want to place your economic drop-offs and how you want to plan out your base, because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be, you can't just spam all your buildings. The Yak caravan is going to be China's trader. This is also seen in the AOM extended edition. Every single civilization has a different kind of caravan unit just for flavor, essentially, and I felt like the Yak worked fine here. For their military, their classical age basic units will each have their own building. The conscript barracks, the crossbow manufactory, and the nomadic camp. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The heroic age grants the imperial garrison, which unlocks elite units and improves nearby unit production. We'll also talk about that later. The imperial bastion is going to be China's fortress. In the mythic age, the imperial foundry will train gunpowder units and improve nearby siege production. And then finally, in the miscellaneous category, every single major god will start with their own unique building, and we'll talk about that soon. Walls can be upgraded to great walls in Age 4, and towers can be upgraded to rocket towers in Age 4. So these are just additional upgrades for the Chinese civilization that I don't cover elsewhere. Instead of going into additional notes, why don't we'll go over this last, and we already talked about this art piece, so I'll just go ahead and dive into the units themselves. I kind of already gave an overview, so I'll just get into it. To talk about this properly and help you guys understand in the easiest way, we're going to start with the feudal age. Sorry, it's not the feudal age. I think it's called the classical age in Age of Mythology. Sorry, I'm too used to Age of Empires 4. So in the classical age, the Chinese will have 3 different military buildings. This is similar to the Greeks, where they have the barracks, the archery range, and the stables, but it's different than the Greeks in the sense that the Greeks have 2 units available at each of those buildings. Their castle age units will also be available at they have the hoplite and the hippospist in the barracks. They have the hippeus and the protomos in the stables, and they have the peltas and the Toxotes in the archer range. So instead, China will have only a single unit available in this building, a single unit and its corresponding upgrades. This is to emphasize that, like, as China, you're going to be wanting to build a lot of buildings. So if you want a bunch of infantry, you're going to have to build a lot of these barracks. If you want a lot of crossbows, you're going to have to be building a lot of these crossbow manufactories. So let's get into each of these buildings and unit types. So we have the G conscript, which is the basic infantry unit for the Chinese. This is the hoplite equivalent, the basic spearman equivalent. In the extended edition, this was known as the halberdier. The reason I changed the name to G conscript is, one, I wanted to emphasize this kind of conscripting mechanic where it's not, you wouldn't actually necessarily conscript anything, but just to emphasize that, like, this is a very cheap, very spammable kind of unit. Historically speaking, your standard run-of-the-mill, like, peasant infantry soldier is going to be wielding a G. And so what is a G exactly? A G is a kind of evolution of a dagger axe. It's sort of like comparable to a halberd. It's a very particular kind of polearm. It has a very interesting evolutionary history here. It actually started with the Ge in the really ancient history. This is like back during the Warring States period and before that even, like the Spring and Autumn period and all that. And then over time, it would evolve into a G, which has so instead of just being a dagger axe, it would actually be, have a spear point at the end. And over time, you kind of see the spear point evolve. And then later on, it becomes something that's more akin to a halberd in the later, like, Song Dynasty period. It's actually really interesting if you think about the history behind all this, because, like, this weapon right here, this Ge, like, this is essentially, like, what's this really good for? What this is really good for is if you have a really large massed infantry formation, this essentially wields like a downward slicing hammer. So you're going to be smashing this from on top of the enemy, getting over their shield perhaps, and smacking the guy behind it. That's kind of like how this weapon is designed. And you'll notice that there's no spear point at the end, which means that there's not really any way for this kind of unit to deal with cavalry charges, which is also really interesting because it tells you something about the history of that time period. It means that there wasn't really any cavalry charges to deal with. And then only later on, when there were cavalry charges, and when you get into like the into like the Han period, that's when you start seeing the spear point evolving here. That's when you start, it corresponds with like the evolution, the development of the stirrup and heavy cavalry, especially among the nomadic cultures that China was dealing with. That's when you start seeing these like spear points coming up. So it's really interesting, like kind of seeing how the weapon design kind of tells a story in the history as well. I don't know what causes this weapon to then evolve into this kind of shape, but that would be also really interesting history as well. So, all in all, G conscript, really cool unit, really spammable basic infantry unit. Anyone who knows will be able to recognize it. The reason I didn't call it halberdier is because it's not quite a halberd. It's better to just call it a G and be a little bit more accurate here. Moving on to the crossbow manufactory, this is going to be the standard archer unit that China has available to them. Of course, it's going to be the Drugunu, not because actually historically China did not necessarily wield a ton of Drugunus. That's not like the unit that they would spam. They might use more crossbows, just like regular news. New just means crossbow, and they might just use like archers or something like that. The Drugunu is a very specific kind of invention. It was legendarily, at least, said to be have invented by Zhuge Liang, who is the famous strategist from the Three Kingdoms period, the advisor to Liu Bei and the Shu kingdom. And he was said to, he's a very all-around smart guy, and he was said to have invented this weapon. There's probably that didn't happen. Probably it was just invented a long time ago, and maybe he made some adjustments that popularized it in some way. Another thing to point out here is that the Drugunu, historically speaking, it is a repeating crossbow, but because it's a repeating crossbow, it's not very strong, which means that oftentimes they would have to lace the crossbow, the bolts with poison to actually make this a deadly weapon. Because without that, it's just, it's a cool modern concept to have a repeating crossbow because you have ammo and stuff like that. And it's very gun-like. It's something that modern audiences are very familiar with, but historically speaking, it's just not necessarily powerful enough to puncture the armor of that time period. But for one reason or another, Age of Empires has decided that Drugunu is going to be the iconic unit for the Chinese, and pretty much every single Chinese civilization, whether it be AoE 4, AoE 3, AoE 2, has a Drugunu type of unit, and that's like been a part of the Chinese identity. I think it's okay because it adds more flavor to the game, and it adds a little bit more of an interesting way to do the archer unit for the Chinese. What does this unit do? It wields a repeating crossbow. It shoots a spread of 3 bolts, like the Cairo Ballista, good against infantry. Now, I don't remember what the Drugunu does in the extended edition, because it did exist over there. I'm not sure. I know that in AoE 4, the Drugunu does like it shoots multiple bolts and they all hit the same target. But Age of Mythology has a very different kind of philosophy when it comes to ranged units. As an example, your archers can miss, your arrows can miss. So I was thinking it would be a little bit more interesting. Like if you had 3 bolts to shoot, what can you do something that's a little bit more unique there that makes the gameplay a little bit more interesting. The fact that you can shoot it like a Cairo Ballista where it has a little bit of spread means that if you had a mass of Jugunu, you have crossbow bolts spreading all over the place and you create this kind of like, you kind of blot out the sun with your bolts. I think that would be a really cool effect, and it kind of reminds me of that scene from Hero at the very end of the movie where you kind of see that cloud of arrows coming in. Minor spoilers there. Lastly, going on to the stable type of building here, I'm calling it the nomadic camp. This is a reference to the kind of nomadic mercenaries or allies that the Chinese would oftentimes employ in their armies, or just like in general having horse archers in their army. The horse archer is going to be the Chinese basic cavalry unit in the Second Age. This is a ranged cavalry that can move quickly and kite, and it's good against cavalry. So the G conscripts are good against... Wait, actually, hold on a second. Maybe this shouldn't be the case here. This should be good against archers if Jugunu are good against infantry and G conscripts are good against cavalry. Maybe Jugunu could also be good against archers? I don't know. I don't know. I don't have strong opinions here. I'm gonna make a change to this just to balance it out a little bit. Obviously, I still need to respect the Trinity, but you can imagine this saying something else. In any case, it's a unit that can kite, it can move quickly, and it had a very strong presence historically. I think we all know that. I think there's also going to be probably a very minor chance that like a civilization like the Mongols would get represented in Age of Mythology. I just have a feeling that there's so many other civilizations that would come before the Mongols that it makes sense to give some horse archer representation in the game to the Chinese because China did historically employ a lot of horse archers, so it makes sense here. So those are the 3 kind of Second Age, your classical age barrack style buildings and your barrack style units. You're going to be seeing a lot of those guys getting spammed out. Now we move into the next age, and I think it's called the Heroic Age in Age of Mythology. In Age 3, what you typically get is you get the fortress type of building. So the Greeks get the fortress, the Egyptians get the Migdol stronghold, and the Norse get the hill fort, and the Atlanteans get the palace. So for the Chinese, they will get the Imperial Bastion. Now, in the extended edition, this was known as the castle, I think. The reason I didn't call this a castle is that castle is a great generic word that will be very useful for any other civilization. I'm sure other civilizations down the line would love to have something called a castle because there isn't necessarily a good word for something else. I think calling this Imperial Bastion allows for potential flavor in the future being spent elsewhere. Now, with most of these kinds of fortress type of buildings, they have access to siege units, so China's no different. They get access to the Crouching Tiger. Now, this, as a lot of people will immediately be thinking, is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the martial arts wuxia movie. Historically, there was a Crouching Tiger. It's called what is it called? Like Hudun or Hudunhu or something like that. Crap, I'm forgetting the Chinese name, but essentially it's literally called a Crouching Tiger. It is a trebuchet, and it is specifically a traction trebuchet. So if you see all these like threads over here, these are basically ropes that men would line up and pull, and once in their combined force, when pulling it, will release this kind of lever here and launch the stone. That's how a traction trebuchet works, and the Chinese were the inventors of the traction trebuchet, and this technology would later on spread over to Persia, where they would invent the counterweight trebuchet that we are more familiar with in the West. So it makes a lot of sense, good flavor. The fact that it's called Crouching Tiger instead of just trebuchet is, I think, a great deal of flavor that's very, very, very appealing. There is another Crouching Tiger type of weapon a little bit later down the line that's more of like a mortar type of unit, but this is a very different kind of unit. They both have the same name. It's a little bit confusing. Now, for the Traction Trebuchet, I was thinking it would have a very long range and very high siege damage, but very slow attack speed. And I struggled a little bit with like making this a very different unit from the Egyptian catapult, because the catapult kind of already fulfills this niche. One way this could be different is if the Crouching Tiger had like AoE damage or something like that when it hit the ground and maybe spread across units. Or another way you can think about it, maybe it does like a fire damage or something like that. The Chinese did have a bunch of different gunpowder weapons available to them, so maybe that's how you can differentiate this. I don't have a lot of strong opinions here. Ultimately, something like this is what I'm hoping we'll see for the Chinese. I mean, the existing Crouching Tiger in Extended Edition, I actually don't know what it does exactly, so unfortunately I don't have a good comparison point. The other building here is the Imperial Garrison. So this is going to be really interesting. So I want to call this out. This is like a kind of elite barracks type of building. It will have 2 units available to it, both of whom are elite. One of them is elite heavy infantry, the other one's elite heavy cavalry. And the idea behind the Imperial Garrison is that typically within every structure you will get to research this technology that allows you to boost the training speed of units of that type. I forgot the name of this technology, but it's a thing that costs like 300 food or 300 wood, and it's kind of like on the far edge of your tech tree. I want to change that up a little bit for the Chinese, because I want China to be all about thinking about how they're laying out their base. So the fact that the Imperial Garrison has this kind of training speed buff, and I would imagine that you can only research the training speed buff at the Imperial Garrison. You can't research it at the crossbow manufactory, for instance. The reason for this is that now the Chinese player needs to be thinking about where do they place their Imperial Garrison so that all of their nearby buildings are military buildings that will benefit from this increased training speed. This makes the base planning a lot more interesting for the Chinese player. Okay, now going into these exact units, whew, starting to lose my voice. So we have the Guandao, which is an elite heavy infantry unit, as mentioned before. This is just going to be a high damage specialist. They're wielding that crescent moon blade halberd. If you're very familiar with Age of Empires 4, you'll know the Iron Blade, the Palace Guard. They're called the Palace Guards. Palace Guard is such a terrible name. It's so generic. I really hate that name. But the Guandao is a much more accurate name. The Guandao is literally the name of the weapon, so it makes more sense that these units are just called Guandaos. These are just your heavy infantry. I think it fulfills a great fantasy for what Chinese heavy infantry should look like, at least in the popular imagination. Historically speaking, did people use Guandaos in war? Probably not, or not really, or maybe they would use them on horseback or something like that. It's not necessarily an infantry weapon, although in popular fantasy it's become associated as kind of an infantry weapon, mainly because it's become associated with like strong martial artists through popular movies and stories and stuff like that. The other unit here is the Iron Pagoda. This is the elite heavy cavalry unit. In the extended edition, we had the unit called the Cataphract, which was kind of the same thing. I think it's a little bit weak to call the Chinese heavy cavalry unit the Cataphract, because Cataphract would be a great unit to name the Persian heavy cavalry unit later down the line. So for the sake of preserving future flavor, I think it makes more sense to call this an Iron Pagoda. Now, historically speaking, Iron Pagodas were not Chinese. They were a part of the Jurchen, I think, Liao dynasty, which is actually kind of like a semi-nomadic invading force from the north, but they kind of Sinicized after they conquered into northern China. So they're like Chinese-ish, but their origin is not necessarily Chinese. Their origin is like nomadic. But the unit's name is so sexy, and people who have seen this channel will know that I love the design of the Iron Pagodas. This particular design right here is actually not the typical design of an Iron Pagoda. You'd be more likely to see like banded lamellar. In this case, we have a soldier, probably like a general type of dude that's wearing mountain pattern armor, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the same principle kind of holds. Is like this super heavily armored, heavy armored horse, heavy armored suit on the back, with this like big ass like fuck off spear. Like this is kind of what I want to see with the Iron Pagoda. So it's meant to be like a tank, like an extremely tanky generalist type of unit. Oh, and here's the Guandao as represented in For Honor. If anyone's familiar with For Honor, there's the Zhengjun or the JJ character over there. That's just that game's representation of Guan Yu or Guandao type of warrior. Finally, moving into the Imperial Age, or rather the Mythic Age for Age of Mythology, we have the Imperial Foundry. So it wouldn't be China if there wasn't some kind of reference to Chinese gunpowder units, because China had such a long history with inventing gunpowder and using it in war. I had to make a call back to it, and so did the extended edition version of the game. Let's talk about how this would work. This building would increase the production speed of nearby siege weapons, so it's very similar to the Imperial Garrison for regular military buildings. This would improve it for, say, the Crouching Tiger in the Imperial Bastion. So again, you have to think about how exactly you're positioning your buildings. So for the units here, you have the Fire Lance, which fires a shotgun-like blast that is devastating at close range. This is very much inspired by the Thunderclap Eruptor. This particular gun right here is not a Thunderclap Eruptor, but it kind of evokes the imagery of what a soldier might look like if they were holding one of these weapons. This is more accurate to what it might look like. It's a big fuck you cannon that you kind of hold in your hand, and it bursts and it kind of explodes in all these different little pellets. This is basically like a proto shotgun. It's not exactly a Fire Lance actually, but I'm still calling it a Fire Lance because Fire Lance is more popularly known and easier to understand name. Fire Lances themselves were more just, I mean, they can kind of be like this. They're spears with something like this that kind of explodes at the end when the enemy charges. So you can kind of think of it like that. It's going to be different than how the Extended Edition dealt with the Fire Lance. The Extended Edition did a really weird thing with the Fire Lance. If I recall correctly, they countered archers or something like that, and they were more like flamethrower type of units or something like that. This is going to be more of like a close range shotgun kind of identity, which I think is going to be great for differentiating this unit from the Rocket Cart. The Rocket Cart, you will be very familiar with it from Civilization games as well as from AoE 4. In AoE 4, they were known as the Nest of Bees. In Civilization and other games, they were known as the Huacha, a Korean type of unique unit. Known in Chinese as the Huotra, which is a fire cart. The idea behind this unit is that I have a strong feeling that the Koreans probably would not be added to Age of Mythology, just because their culture overlaps so much with everything that you would see in Chinese mythology. That's going to be a very controversial statement. I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with me on that. I do think that there's a lot of space to design a Korean civilization, say in Age of Empires 4, where the designs are a lot more nuanced and smaller in scale. But this designs in Age of Mythology are very broad and very general and rely heavily on pop generalization. So for that reason, I don't think Korea quite fits. It would look too similar to China. So that's why I was thinking, hey, China also had this kind of unit historically, this kind of like multiple rocket shooter. It'd be great to have that in this game as well. Rains down explosive rockets upon the enemy, has a wide spread, and is effective against both buildings and units. So this would be a really awesome unit to see in the late game. I have a feeling that having really powerful siege weapons for China would be a really strong identity for this civilization that makes it rather distinct from other civilizations. So that would be really cool. And going into the Titan Gate. So in the Extended Edition, we have Pangu. He makes a lot of sense as the Titan because he is the primordial god. He's the guy that originally came out of the universal egg, separated heaven and earth, and basically created the world. It makes a lot of sense that he would be the Titan because that's kind of the narrative that the Titans have in Age of Mythology. They're kind of the creation deities. And Pangu is kind of like a big, beastly looking man. In the game, in the Extended Edition, they made him look a little bit too much like a dude. I would much rather him look like a kind of hairy, beastly, kind of monstrous figure, almost like the Beast Titan from Attack on Titan or something like that. But at the same time, there's a few other things to consider. If you think about the popular aesthetic of like a Chinese giant, you're not necessarily thinking about Pangu, although he could fit. You're more thinking about like characters like this. So I want to give a shout out to a couple other options here. One is the 4 Heavenly Kings. This is a shot from Black Myth Wukong, and you can see here these like 4 gigantic, like Deva-looking warriors that are kind of threatening Wukong. These characters appear in Chinese mythology in a lot of different stories, and they're always said to be like really gigantic, like terrifying beasts. It could fit the Titan mold, although they're a little bit too ornate in their design that it doesn't quite fit with what a Titan should look like. I feel like all the Titans in the game that we have right now are more beastly looking, a little bit more simplistic looking. These guys are very ornate and complex looking, so it seems a little bit like a little bit weird to have them. And then the other option here is Zhulong, and this is just some artist's rendering of it. I forgot the name of the original artist, but the reason why I want to show this is because of this kind of like dragon face. I'm imagining almost like a, Ra is like a buff giant looking dude with a bird's head. I'm imagining like a buff giant looking dude with a dragon's head for Zhulong. Zhulong is the dragon of fire, or I think he's a dragon of fire. I think he's a dragon that's associated with fire. So it kind of would be cool to see almost like a Godzilla-like style unit as a Titan. Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense to have a dragon-headed dude. But Pangu could also work. Going into the wonders, yeah, we'll talk about the wonders next. I have these three buildings: the Forbidden Palace, the Mausoleum of the First Emperor, aka the Terracotta Soldiers, and then the Temple of Heaven. The Forbidden Palace and the Temple of Heaven are both Ming Dynasty era structures, whereas the Mausoleum of the First Emperor is a Qin Dynasty era structure. So very like what, over 1,000 years, easily like almost 2,000 years of history separating these structures. So it's a little bit awkward in that sense, but at the same time, these are some of the most recognizable structures when it comes to China in the popular consciousness. So it kind of makes sense to represent these buildings. Plus, I do want to call out that, like, for the aesthetic of the civ, we would have to take I think we would have to take a Ming Dynasty style aesthetic first and foremost. Ming Dynasty is more like 1600s-ish period, but like that period is where a lot of the stories and a lot of the visuals for these stories kind of became really popular. And most modern retellings of these stories kind of evoke that Ming Dynasty spirit. A lot of the armor that you'll see, like for instance, it's like mountain pattern armor, this kind of helmet style. This is more of like a Ming Dynasty era kind of design, or at least the Song Dynasty era kind of design. Even though like the more mythological period of China might be more like a Qin or a Shang or Zhou or even Xia dynasty, which are like way in the BCEs. So even though those are the mythological periods, the armor and the styling of everything just isn't as evocative of Chinese mythology in the popular sense and in the popular fantasy sense in the modern day times. This is also the reason why I removed the unit of the war chariot. I think the Chinese in the extended edition had a chariot unit available in Age 4, and I removed that unit entirely because I felt like the chariot unit was taking away too much identity from the Egyptian war chariot, which was like a ranged archer unit, and also the Chinese charioteers don't quite fit the same mold of like these kind of like cataphract era units. Like by the time you have cataphracts, chariots have been long gone for thousands of years. So it just doesn't overlap in a very clean way. And I feel like other civilizations in the future might benefit from having that chariot identity more, like maybe the Celts, for instance, down the line, or maybe like a Persian type of civ down the line. So we'll leave it at that. The last thing I didn't talk about here are the Age 1 buildings. And that's because these guys are going to be a little bit more complicated. The last thing I didn't talk about here are the Age 1 buildings, so let's get into that. We have the Town Center, which is your standard town center. You have the Commoner, which is the Chinese version of the Villager. It's gathers slower than the standard Villager, but it builds faster. And then we have the Imperial Official, who can oversee nearby commoners, granting them a 30-second gathering speed buff one at a time. So this is exactly like the Prelate from AoE 4. The reason why I did it like this is because the Imperial Official from Age of Empires 4 can be tasked to oversee a building, which will improve the drop-off and improve the training and production time in that building. This is exactly how the Pharaoh works in Age of Mythology, so I didn't want to just directly overlap with what the Egyptians already have, and so instead I'm borrowing from the Prelate concept. Which I think, like, you know, it works fine. It still makes you think a little bit differently, and it still kind of functions in a very similar way. The Imperial Examinations technology available in Age 3 is a call out to the Gaokao, or I mean, modern day it would be like the Gaokao, but like back then I don't remember what it was called, but it was just the Imperial Examination system. It was to allow a more meritocratic way for Chinese people to kind of elevate in society and allow for the best talent to serve the emperor. This basically buffs the way what the overseeing does. It also buffs now the movement speed and the gathering capacity of the villagers, so just increases the efficiency of that a little bit more. The thing I want to call out here is this Imperial Official type of unit is really interesting, and the reason why I really think it should be included in the game, and it's sad that it wasn't included in the extended edition, is because this is a very interesting social class that's unique to China. Just like, you know, maybe priests were particularly powerful in Egyptian society, in Chinese society we have the Shidafu, or scholar gentry, or scholar official. If you watch any Chinese dramas, historical dramas, you will see these hats with the ears coming out, because so much like court intrigue and like just politicking is always going on with these dudes, and these dudes are very influential. In fact, when the first Portuguese arrived, they were told that these guys were known as Mandarins, and that the language that they were speaking was Mandarin, the language of these imperial officials, and that's where we get Mandarin Chinese, because that's the language that the imperial officials were speaking. and yeah, these guys are extremely influential to Chinese society, and they're very unique, and I would love to see them represented in the game, just like they're represented in AoE 4. The other thing I want to call out here is the farmer. So historically, so in Chinese, farmers are known as nong. If you remember Shen Nong from the major gods of the extended edition, Shen Nong just literally means like god farmer, or the farmer deity or something like that. Farmers are, farmers have a very iconic image in China, especially when it comes to like their wear. I would love to see kind of like the rice hat going on with the Chinese farmer. I think it's really appropriate. We do see something like that in AoE 4. Would love to see that in Age of Mythology as well. I don't know if this dude is actually a farmer or if he's just a guy wearing a costume, but this is such a cool shot that I had to include it. Moving on to the temple. So this is going to be really interesting. So since each god will have a scout hero that comes out, it does make sense for those scout heroes to basically immediately pick up relics, because that would be pretty broken. So just like with the Egyptians, this is basically borrowed directly from the Egyptian technology. They have to research the technology from the temple that will allow their heroes to pick up relics. Now their priests can go out and pick up relics, and in this case now Chinese heroes can go out and pick up relics. The reason I'm naming them the Immortals of Kunlun, Kunlun mountains are basically like, it's kind of like a parallel to the Mount Olympus in Greek mythology. This is where this is where all the gods live. This is where all the enlightened people live. It's kind of like a mythical mountain that's off somewhere in the west. Some people hypothesize that it is the famous Mount Kailash of the Himalayas. It's got a very special place in Chinese mythology, in the mind of Chinese mythology. And immortals are Taoist people who have like kind of cultivated themselves so much that they've reached enlightenment essentially, and upon doing so they can fly, they can get magical powers, they can do whatever they want, and they reside on Kunlun, on the Kunlun mountain. In the extended edition, the immortals, the 8 immortals, I think they were represented as heroes in the game for China, which to me didn't really make sense, because immortals, while they have magical powers and maybe they could be used to fight beasts and myth units and stuff like that, they weren't necessarily fighters. They were more just like these enlightened people who were way above all of this. It doesn't make sense to see them like using swords and bows and arrows and stuff like that, which is what they were doing in the previous version of the game, in the previous version of the civilization. So I would much rather just, I'm gonna give a reference to them in this technology, but I'm not trying to include them in this design. Instead, I have this unit known as the Warrior Monk. This is a human unit that will counter myth units, very similar to how the Jarl worked in the previous version of Age of Mythology. The Warrior Monk will have a special ability known as stand swapping, which allows him to switch between a quarterstaff and a bow. Now, historically, we have the Shaolin monks. We have all kinds of different like monks and dojos and training schools where people practice martial arts and developed and cultivated different styles. And a lot of times these groups would be very active in times of war and participate as well. So it makes a lot of sense to kind of like give a call out to this kind of unit. People who play AoE 4 will be able to recognize the Shaolin monks. People who play Age of Empires 3 will be able to recognize the monks that you can get as the civilization there. I don't want it to be quite as silly as Age of Empires 3, where they're like jumping around and punching people who have guns. That was a little bit of a silly design, but I like the idea of them like switching between different weapons. Historically, were monks kind of associated with the bow and arrow? Not as much. They're more associated with like melee weapons, but I think it's okay to use the bow and arrow here because they do need some way to counter ranged myth units. And this is also evocative of the extended edition's hero design with the immortals. The reason why I'm even adding this unit though is because Chinese heroes you only get 4 of them in total as you age up, kind of like the Greeks, but I'm imagining that the Chinese heroes aren't going to be quite as strong as the Greek heroes, and because they're also going to be used to buff other units. So the warrior monk is kind of there to supplement your anti-myth unit capabilities. If the enemy is really spamming myth units, you can add some warrior monks into your mix to basically counter that and just give a little bit more optionality there. Lastly, we're going to go into the dock. So fans of my channel who have been following my concepts will know that I never talk about water in any of my Civ concepts, and the reason for that is that water is not a very complete design when it comes to Age of Empires 4. Even in Age of Mythology though, I still think that water is not a very well thought out design, but I mean, in many ways, a lot of water's design is not in many ways, a lot of Age of Mythology's design is not necessarily thought out well when it comes to competitive play, and it's not really the point of the game. I think the game's more of like a lot of the design decisions here more emphasize flavor rather than balance. So I'm just kind of doing the same thing here. I'm going to talk briefly about how I would design the water here, but I don't have strong opinions on the actual balancing of it. The war junk is going to be the basic arrow ship. Every single civilization has some kind of basic arrow ship. This one will be tankier but slower. Cool little fun fact, junk just means trun. It's the same thing. Trun in Chinese means boat. Basically, when the Portuguese first arrived, they interacted with the traders over there, and they saw some of the ships that were being used in Indonesia as well, and they learned the name of that boat, and I guess somehow in the Portuguese pronunciation it turned into junk, and when that got brought over to England, that's where we picked up this word in English. But they're not junks. I don't know why they're called junks. I don't know why that word stuck. I feel like we should just call them trun, but since the word is here, I'm just going to use it. War junk is the basic Chinese arrow ship. The Mengchong is the melee ship for China. It will throw thunder crash fire bombs at nearby ships. This is actually very similar to how it works in the extended edition, where you have this little ship that kind of shoots these little fire bombs. Historically speaking, Mengchong were the ships that were used during the Three Kingdoms. They were kind of boarding vessels with these kind of like interesting rooftops here, which I feel like looks perfectly like a melee ship in that you would expect to see in Age of Mythology. These were the kind of ships that you would expect to see in like the famous Battle of Chibi, the Red Cliff Battle, where Cao Cao lost his whole navy to the combined efforts of the Shu and Wu alliance. Lastly, here is the low trun, which is essentially, this directly translates to tower ship. And here's a representation of what a tower ship might look like. It's got this fortified tower on top, and that is a traction trebuchet sitting at the very top there. So essentially, you can pull this lever down, launch rocks, and siege at people from very far away. So I think it would be really cool to see a onboard trebuchet on this ship, although every single siege ship in Age of Mythology has a ballista type of type of weapon instead. So if it just has a ballista type of weapon, I think that would be okay as well. Now it's a little bit weird that I'm including the word trun as well as junk here, but I just feel like calling it like a tower junk would just be kind of lame. So having this like other name is just adding a little bit more flavor. And again, Age of Mythology is not really about accuracy. It's not really about getting things exactly right. It's a lot of the choices in the game already are all about flavor. So I'm just here to add some flavor with these different names. It'll make it a little bit more distinct as well. Going into the third age, we have the myth unit. So previously in Age of Mythology, there were certain gods that granted special water bonuses, but in Retold, a lot of the changes were made. Essentially, every single civilization will get a water myth unit when it comes to hitting the heroic age. For the Chinese, that will be the Kun, or Kun. I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, but in the mythology, it's known as a giant fish, but in modern days, you'll see artists interpret it as a giant floating whale. And here's a representation of it in the movie 3,000 Miles from Chang'an, which is a beautiful movie about the poet Li Bai. At one point, he drinks so much wine that he goes on a hallucinatory trip where he's actually floating in the cosmos with these giant Quinn creatures. This is all a representation of one of his famous poems where he actually writes about something very much like this, which is a really cool reference here. Very good movie. I highly recommend you guys watch it if you're interested in Chinese history at all. Now, the Kun will have a special ability I'm calling Breach. It's basically just the same way a whale might breach. The Kun will leap into the air and slam down, knocking nearby enemy ships airborne and dealing massive damage. So this is very similar to how the battle board works for the Norse. It's just a very big disruptor kind of myth unit. And the last thing I want to call out here is this technology known as Summon the Eastern Wind. It increases ship movement speed, especially for the Mengchong. Now, anyone who's a fan of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms or has played Dynasty Warriors will know what this is a reference to. This is a reference to when Zhuge Liang, during the Battle of Chibi, during the Battle of Red Cliffs, had to perform a ritual to summon the Eastern Wind, basically to allow his fleet to gain an advantage during the naval fight, and also when he does his fire bombing on Cao Cao's fleet, the wind will carry the fire and spread it across his the ships. And supposedly this is what happened in history, and the battle was won and ultimately changed the fate of Chinese history. But I don't know how much of a ritual was actually involved here, or magical spell that actually influenced that, but it is a cool piece of Chinese legend. So really great reference to have there. So that is all of the Chinese units and buildings. Now let's get into the juicy stuff, the Chinese Pantheon. Now you have a good overview of how the Chinese civilization works. We can start talking about the Chinese Pantheon rather. So let's get into it. The three major gods here, as I mentioned, as I teased a little bit earlier, are Yu Huang Da Di, the Jade Emperor, Yan Luo, also known as Yan Wang, or King Yama in English. He's the judge of the underworld, and Nuwa, who's the goddess of creation. Nuwa was included as a major god in the previous game, in extended edition, and I felt like it made sense to include her here. I thought really long and hard about what the third god would be here, because Chinese mythology, as mentioned before, doesn't have a very clear pantheon. There's no big three in Chinese mythology necessarily, and I get that the extended edition included the three sovereigns, Nuwa, Fuxi, and Shennong, but they're not. It just doesn't quite make sense to have those three as like the big three major gods in a game like here. Like Fuxi is not exactly the Zeus parallel, and like Shennong just doesn't like really fit. Like, I don't know, it's just a little bit weird. They're like more like origin gods. They're more like titans almost, or they're like the creator gods. They're not like the big boss gods in the stories. Yu Huang is the closest thing I would say that we can get to like the big boss god in the stories, mainly because he's the big emperor in Journey to the West. In Journey to the West, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, goes up into heaven and basically wreaks havoc in the emperor's palace. And Yu Huang is that emperor, at least according to the story, because the story borrows from a lot of Taoist tradition. He also goes into Sun Wukong also goes into the underworld, where he writes his name out of the list of mortality, basically making him immortal, and that is Yan Luo, or King Yama's underworld. You'll also be familiar with King Yama if you've seen the Dragon Ball series, or if you know anything about Hindu mythology, because it's kind of the same character that kind of is spread across all of these different cultures. And Nuwa really doesn't fit with the rest of these two, but Nuwa has been like such a big important deity in Chinese mythology that it just made sense to have her as a major god when Shennong and Fuxi maybe don't quite make the cut. She's just so influential, and I like that she's like got this really unique design going on for her. She's half snake. In Chinese mythology, like in the Western canon, like snakes are oftentimes associated with like evil and deviousness. In Chinese mythology, it's not the same. Snakes don't have this kind of negative connotation, and so we have these like half snake creatures or half snake goddesses, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually a pretty auspicious thing. So I think that's a really cool contrast to something like in Greek mythology, where you have like Medusa, who's like kind of seen as a villainous figure. All right, going into the specifics here. Yu Huang Da Di, another alternative name. Oh, a little bit more about Yu Huang Da Di. He is featured in Smite. He is seen in obviously Journey to the West and a few other stories. He's kind of like the big boss entity. He's the representation of the emperor in heaven. And there's there's many different emperors in heaven that are spread across Chinese mythology. To call some of them out, there's Shangdi, who's kind of like not exactly a figure, but just like the idea of this emperor in heaven. There's Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, who's kind of like seen as like the first emperor. Fuxi is kind of seen as one of the first emperors. There's so many actually, but I kind of see all of them kind of combined into this single character that I'm calling Yu Huang, just because Yu Huang is the closest thing I can get in the Taoist pantheon. And yeah, so they're all kind of like this kind of emperor, kind of big boss kind of figure. His thing is going to be imperial officials and elites. The way his bonuses work is that imperial officials will buff all nearby commoners instead of just one at a time, so it's more of like an aura buff now. Imperial garrison units are cheaper, so you can spam these elite units better, and veterancy upgrades will be free, so you feel really good rushing age ups as this civilization. The god power here is Somersault Cloud. This is a reference to the cloud that Wukong rides, which is also popularly known as the Flying Nimbus if you've seen Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball. It's what Goku's riding. The way this god power will work is you target allied units and they will gain the ability to fly for a short period of time. They'll be riding the somersault cloud, and during this time period they'll have faster movement as well as a ranged attack, so they can hit people from above while enemies can't necessarily hit them. This is really cool god power because it's so evocative of Chinese mythology and all the Chinese mythological stories. Whenever you have like gods coming down from heaven and like delivering news or like talking or fighting, that you always kind of see them in the imagery like riding these clouds. So having this kind of god power, I think, and just seeing it in game it would be amazing. It'd be so thematically fitting, and it's a shame that we didn't have something like this already in the extended edition. Tang Sanzang is going to be the hero. This is the main character in Journey to the West. He's the guy that's journeying to the West. He's Sun Wukong's master, and he's a monk that will ride a horse. Tang Sanzang famously cannot. He's such a devout monk that he cannot do any violence. So in this case, if he does fight, his horse will be the one fighting for him, and he'll just be kind of cowering in fear or something like that. And he'll be weak in combat, as all scout heroes should be. His ability here is that while he's outside of combat, the white dragon horse, his famous horse here, will be able to move very quickly. One might wonder why it took so long for him to reach the West. And then the tea house is the unique building here. So tea is a very unique Chinese thing, so it made a lot of sense to kind of evoke the imagery of a tea house. This will slowly train imperial officials for free, and you'll be limited to only building 3 of these. The more houses that you have in the vicinity of the tea house, the more this imperial official training will accelerate. This is again to have this like aura effect that makes you think about base planning when you're playing the Civ. That's the whole point of this, and I just think it would be a fun mechanic. I love the base building mechanics in Age of Empires 4 with all the influence systems and everything. It makes you think carefully about how you want to lay out everything. I'm sad that we don't see that in other games like Age of Empires 3 or Age of Empires or Age of Mythology. So I would love to bring the mechanic over. Age of Empires 3 does have a civilization that does something close to that, which is the Hausa. They also have these kind of like aura building effects, which I really love. They're one of my favorite civilizations for that reason. The 100 Schools of Thought is going to be this guy's unique technology. Tea houses can now be toggled to passively generate a resource. So rather than training imperial officials for free, eventually you can toggle it to now passively generate a resource. And as before, the passive generation increases with each nearby house. This is for the late game when you don't necessarily need imperial officials anymore and you just want some resources passively generated. It works very similarly. The 100 Schools of Thought historically were basically all these different philosophical I guess schools of thought that existed during this, I think this was the spring and autumn period. From this came Confucianism and Taoism and legalism and all that good, Moism, all that good stuff. So just wanted to make a cool little historical reference over there. Moving on to Yan Luo. As mentioned before, he's known as King Yama in popular, in English at least. His mechanics here are going to be about favor and heroes. Commoners will gather favor faster. He can use favor to speed up production. He can spend favor to stim buff heroes or ransom them when they fall. So his whole thing is going to be about gathering a lot of favor and then spending that in a really interesting way. This ties into his unique building here called Ancestral Shrine. I wanted to make a reference to the filial piety belief system that China has, where there's a lot of ancestor worship that is important in Chinese culture. So this building will automatically generate favor whenever nearby buildings will generate favor. So this is kind of like a favor generator type of building. And then the black and white impermanence technology is referenced to these 2 characters, the black and white impermanence. This is not necessarily thematic, but the bonus here is going to be Ancestral Shrines will now passively generate additional bonus favor depending on how many times your heroes have died. I think this is going to be really fun because the hero mechanic, as mentioned earlier, you can have the hero die and then you can pick him back up to revive him. So this technology basically says like you have to put your hero in risky positions and then go back and get him. And each time you successfully do that, you will generate bonus favor, which can then be used to buff up the rest of your civilization. So I think there's a lot of really interesting risk-reward gameplay that can be enabled by a technology like this, which would be pretty cool. The hero here is Bai Susan. Susan? I've never made that connection, but yeah, I guess she's Susan. But she's Lady Whitesnake, more popularly known as Lady Whitesnake. She is weak in combat, and as mentioned before, She's a very popular figure in Chinese mythology, especially nowadays since her movie did so well. And when she's outside of combat, she will transform into a snake, which will grant her stealth. So this is the first time I think Age of Mythology has ever had stealth, but I wanted to introduce some kind of interesting, unique mechanic with the white snake here. The god power here is, I'm calling it Death Note. Historically, it's not called Death Note. It's more like the list of mortality or something like that. But the way this mechanic would work is you target an enemy unit and a timer will appear above their head, and when the timer is up they will die, and the duration of that timer will depend upon the unit health. So this is a great way to execute a unit, and everyone will kind of know that you're executing this unit. It's very similar to Zeus's Thunderbolt in that sense, but instead of being instant, it's timer based, and so there's a little bit more interesting mechanics, a little bit more interesting back and forth going on there. Now the reason why I'm calling it Death Note is that both in Japanese mythology and in Chinese mythology there's this kind of like the idea of like a list of mortality going on in the underworld. That is what influenced the direction for Death Note. That's what influenced this idea. And Death Note as a name is just more popularly known, and I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh, whoa, I recognize that name. Like, this is interesting. I want to read into it. Did China really come up with Death Note? Not exactly. I'm not claiming that China came up with Death Note. It is a Japanese concept as well, but there's a lot of shared ideas across these different cultures, and I wanted to make a cool reference to that. And lastly, going into Nuwa here, human units and economy is going to be her thing. Commoners will cost nothing to train. Supply offices are free to construct, farms are cheaper to construct, and buildings will grant a free unit upon completion. This is very much influenced by the Jushi landmark from Age of Empires 4, if you're familiar with that. And for the unique building here is the Tulo. This is known as the village in AoE 4. I think it was also known as a village in AoE 3, although I might be misremembering there. But this is the very special kind of building that you will see in Fujian. This is the building, this kind of like fortified, like residential house kind of structure that was made by the Hakka people who had to flee northern China when the nomadic invasions happened. They come into southern China, and they're known as Hakkas because Hakka basically means like guest. So these were kind of like the guest people, like refugee people who end up having to like establish these fortified residences in order to resist like all the bandits that were plaguing them when they were trying to flee. So this is a tanky house. It will provide 40 population and will boost gathering speed on nearby farms. So the kind of aura mechanic here, the way you're thinking about laying out your base now is you want to build farms around these kinds of buildings. And now rammed earth is the unique technology for Nuwa. Tulo will now function as towers and benefit from all tower upgrades. So just like how historically these were kind of like mini castles, I want to make a reference to that over here. Nuwa's unique hero will be Da Yu, who is basically the great engineer. He was this legendary engineer king that essentially like stopped all the flooding that the Yellow River was doing and allowed society to thrive as a result. He's weak in combat as all the other scout heroes are, but his really cool ability here is that he can actually be used to build buildings. This means that your villagers don't need to build buildings as much. You can focus on using this hero. And Replicate is going to be Nuwa's god power. Nuwa famously is kind of like the Prometheus figure in Chinese mythology. She molded humanity out of clay the same way that, that Prometheus did. And in this case, Nuwa can target any military unit and create an allied copy of it at full health that spawns right next to it. So you can imagine, like in the middle of a fight, if you're like slightly outmatched, you can copy a unit, maybe the enemy's like most important myth unit or something like that, and all of a sudden you can swing the battle to your advantage potentially. So that's kind of how I'm imagining this kind of power being used. Now we'll go into the minor gods here. So for the second age, we have Zhongqi. I actually don't know how to pronounce his name. Zhongqi, Chang'e, and Houtu. Zhongqi is the Ghostbuster. This image is from Smite, which and if you're familiar with him, he's kind of like the guy that like controls all the ghosts essentially. His focus is going to be on G conscripts and myth units. His god power is Black Calamity. He'll cover an area with fog, and you can't see, but you can see through it, but your enemies cannot. So this is a really great way to kind of play around with the fog of war mechanic. I'm surprised that something like this doesn't already exist in the game actually, but it would be cool to see. And black fog is kind of a common kind of mysterious omen that you'll see motif that's evoked in Chinese mythology pretty often, so that's why I'm including it here. Xingtian is the hero for Zhongqi. This is kind of a weird choice. So Xingtian, the reason I'm picking him is he's got a very unique look. His his nipples became eyeballs and his belly button became a mouth. And this is after he was like trying to overthrow the emperor in heaven or something like that, and the emperor like chopped off his head, but he's got such a like, what's the word, like stubborn pursuant spirit that he refused to die and just kind of grew a face on his body and then kept on going. He is kind of like the embodiment of perseverance in Chinese mythology. And it's not clear whether or not he's actually a heroic figure, but to me that sounds pretty heroic. I've seen some concepts where he's been included as like a myth unit type of dude. I can see that as well, but I just feel like historically there's only one of this guy, and it's such an interesting character. And I also think it fits well with Zhonghui, who's kind of like a weird ghost buster type of god dude anyways, that Xing Tian kind of fits here. He was featured in Smite, where he looks more like Mordekaiser. So there's also that. I didn't include the Smite image because I am generally not a fan of the Smite art designs, but I felt like they did a pretty good job with Zhonghui here. And lastly, Xing Tian will be the basic infantry hero, so he will buff nearby G conscripts. Now, the Zhangshi is the unique myth unit for Zhonghui. The Zhangshi is a Qing Dynasty era, so it's actually even later than Ming Dynasty, very modern actually, a hopping zombie or vampire. This was made popular by various like Hong Kong movies in like the 80s-ish, maybe even like the 70s. You kind of have this like kind of Qing Dynasty outfit, and they have this like talisman on their face. This is a very iconic look, and you'll see it in Eastern media a lot whenever it comes to zombies. The special ability here will be Life Drain. He'll grab onto an enemy unit and drain its life, healing itself while damaging the enemy. For the technologies here, I have the Gui, which is basically just means monster or ghost in Chinese, and it just upgrades the Zhangshi to be even stronger. The Dagger Axe, G conscripts will gain bonus attack range, so just a thing that helps the G conscripts a little bit. One thing that would be really cool is that if you mass a bunch of G conscripts, I want the like people in the back row to actually be able to attack the people in the front row. So you can have 2 rows of units potentially hitting the enemy unit line, which would historically kind of evoke that kind of like massed infantry battalion kind of thing that China had going on for it. And lastly, the Paper Talisman, which will reduce the cost of myth units. Not a very inspired technology here. I don't have a lot of thoughts here, but something to do with Paper Talismans would be really cool here. Moving on to Chang'e. Chang'e is all about Zhuge and heroes. So each of these second age heroes will benefit one of the unit types you can have access to. So Chang'e will get Zhuge and heroes. This is evident from the hero here, who is Hou Yi. Hou Yi is also a hero featured in Smite. Again, I didn't include his design from that game because I didn't quite like his design in that game, a little bit too fantastical to me, but he is the legendary archer who shot down the 9 suns. He's also very thematically fitting with Chang'e here. He's the husband of Chang'e, he's an archer hero, and he will be buffing nearby Zhuge. Even though he's not wielding a Zhuge, the fact that he's an archer kind of makes sense here. And also, the god power here is Levitate. You target an area, and all enemy units there will be briefly suspended in midair. So imagine kind of like the Oranos power, where you kind of knock everyone up. But now, after you knock everyone up, everyone's kind of like spinning in the air, like in slow motion for a little bit. I think that'd be really cool, and also like it would look kind of hilarious. Units in midair cannot attack nor be attacked except for by ranged units, which is obviously really fitting if you have Hou Yi and a bunch of Zhuge aiming at those midair units. I think this would be a really cool power. It has good synergy. And the Hundun is the myth unit here. This is a creature that was popularized recently in Shang-Chi, where there's this little thing called Morris that I think Trevor Slatty, the character of Trevor Slatty, was calling him. It's gonna be a flying myth unit. It's kind of cute. It kind of fits Chang'e. Chang'e's kind of cute. And its special attack here will be Confusion. It will target a unit, and that unit will become neutral. And this is because historically the Hundun is a being of chaos, and I can see why someone looking at this thing would become very confused. So a pretty powerful ability here, but otherwise relatively weak flying myth unit. The Elixir of Life. This is a reference to the elixir that Chang'e took that made her immortal. So originally she and Hou Yi were a husband and wife, and then she took the elixir of life because someone was going to steal it from Hou Yi, and then she got ascended up to the moon and became the moon spirit. The Sun Piercer is a reference to the Hou Yi's ability to take out the suns. Druganu bolts will now apply poison damage. Now, I mentioned earlier that Druganu historically did use poison. I don't love this thematic tie-in here. It doesn't quite fit, but this is the best I could do. I'm sure there's a better name that could be come up with here. Moonhair is a reference to the rabbit on the moon. Instead of so you know how like in the West we see a man on the moon. In China they see a rabbit on the moon, and that's the Moonhair. This technology makes heroes deal more damage. I don't think it's very inspired as well. I'm sure there's something else that people can come up with here, but I would love to see some kind of reference to the Moonhair as a technology when it comes to Chang'e. And lastly, the Dijiang. This is just an upgrade for the Hunduan. It just becomes stronger as a result. The art here. This is a beautiful representation of Chang'e, by the way. The artist here is Xiao Guangsun, who is a very prominent. I'm not sure if this is from a game or not, but Xiao Guangsun Sun has done a bunch of art for a lot of different games, like League of Legends, for instance. You'll see his work in a lot of the splash arts over there. So very beautiful representation of Chang'e, I think. Lastly, we have Hotu or Hotu. Actually, don't know how to pronounce this exactly, but Hotu is basically like Mother Earth in China. In the extended edition, we had the I forgot what his name was, like Di Gong or something like that. But he is basically like kind of like a god of local earth spirits. Hotu is kind of like the girl on top of all the Digong type of earth spirits. She's the big boss when it comes to the earth. So felt like it would be a cool thing to have her represented here. The hero for her is so she's gonna be buffing buildings and horse archers, and the hero here is gonna be Hua Mulan. Mulan is obviously one of the most well-known heroes in Chinese legend, mainly because of the Disney movie, and it didn't quite make sense because she's not a mythological character, at least not exactly. She's more of like a made-up character from a poem, and maybe she has some historical basis, maybe not, but because she's so recognizable and because she also got featured in Smite, I felt like it would be appropriate to include her here. I would love to see more female representation of heroes in the game after all, so it makes a lot of sense to have her here. So she's going to be a horse archer hero. The reason why she's a horse archer hero is that historically, if Mulan did exist, she would have actually hailed from a kind of more of like a Mongolic tribe. She's actually not Chinese. She's more like a northern nomadic Mongolian type of tribal kind of person. And so it makes a lot of sense that they would be using horse archers, and she would be a horse archer. So that's how I see her being used here. Another reference to horse archers here is the White Horse Riders. This is a reference to, if anyone has played Three Kingdoms Total War, Gao Song Zan, I think his name is, he had a famous unit known as the White Horse Riders, which were an elite horse archer cavalry unit where everyone had white horses. And apparently those white horses are so bright that a lot of people would just run away when they see them because it's apparently so terrifying. Zhao Yun, the famous poster boy for Dynasty Warriors, used to be a white horse rider before he joined Liu Bei's forces. So this technology just makes horse archers shoot while moving. This is, if anyone's played AoE 4, knows exactly how devastating this could be with the Mongolai for the Mongols. I don't know if this is even possible given the Age of Empires, Age of Mythology Retold engine, but it would be cool to see something like this. The god power here is the Stone Sentinel Maze. This is also a reference to Three Kingdoms, the remnants of Three Kingdoms. This was a maze that was used by Zhuge Liang to thwart Lu Xun when Lu Xun was ambushing Liu Bei's camp. This all this does is it makes the targeted area surrounded by an impassable wall of stone sentinels. So imagine kind of like if you ever played League of Legends, like Yorick can summon this like wall that kind of surrounds your enemy champion. I'm imagining something similar, like an impassable wall that just kind of obstructs movements and makes it really hard to get through. The myth unit here is going to be the Terracotta Soldier. So we already saw this in the extended edition. The difference is that in the extended edition, the Terracotta Soldiers were kind of like they're kind of like built to be destroyed. They would fall apart and they would spread poison after they die. Here, I'm doing things a little bit differently. Their special ability here is going to be Construct. So when they're idle, the Terracotta Soldier will build additional copies of itself for free. So it's almost like the automaton from the Atlanteans, but like a little bit different. Instead of repairing each other, they would just build new ones. And so the idea is with the terracotta soldiers is that these guys will help spam themselves over time, which I think could be really, really cool. I would also love to see like multiple terracotta soldiers working together to build like the the new terracotta soldier. So you can kind of see like the collaboration. The more upfront investment you make of terracotta soldiers, maybe that leads to additional terracotta soldiers down the line. And then you almost like don't even want to engage with these guys. You just want them building an army of terracotta soldiers, which I think would be pretty cool. Another thing to call out here is that historically, even though we think of them as kind of like made of clay because that's how we see them today, these guys were painted just like with the Greek statues, how the Greek statues were actually painted. Ancient Chinese statues were also full of color, also painted in a photorealistic way. So I would love to see painted terracotta soldiers instead of the clay ones that we get in the extended edition. Stone armor is going to be the upgrade that will affect them. Stone armor is a reference to this kind of stone armor that was found in the mausoleum back when they dug it up. It's got a very interesting design, and I think a lot of historical reenactments of this Qin era armor kind of like echoes this kind of design. Because this is the best, most well-preserved concept that we have of armor from that time period. And the idea here is that your terracotta soldiers will now be upgraded to stone sentinels, which are much tankier. So the idea is these are spammable, tanky, though relatively weak kinds of myth units. They're to soak up damage, basically. And oracle bones here, buildings will generate additional favor. Not a lot of thematic tie-in there, but I wanted to include oracle bones somewhere just because this is such a important piece of Chinese history. These bones that had the earliest evidence of Chinese script used back during the Shang Dynasty. Going into the heroic age, I am slowly running out of breath and running out and starting to lose my voice, but hopefully I can still get through this. We have Aokuang, Xiwangmu, and Hebo. So Aokuang is the dragon of the Eastern Sea. You'd be familiar with him from Smite, and he's also from the Journey to the West story, where he gets like bullied by Wukong basically. In Smite, they made Aokuang look like a badass, but in all the stories, Aokuang is kind of a bitch. He kind of just gets bullied by all the heroes. Like Ninja comes down and kills Aokuang's son, and like Aokuang doesn't get justice, or at least it takes a while for him to get justice. He complains a lot. It's just weird. Like he's more of like a simpy kind of, almost like a bully victim in the stories rather than like a badass. But so that's why I didn't choose the Smite rendition of Aokuang. Instead, I chose this one where he looks a little bit more dopey. And I couldn't find the exact artist. I think this is from some kind of Chinese game. But I feel like this is kind of more what I'm thinking about when I think of Aokuang. He's a dragon king. So in Chinese mythology, the seas are ruled by the 4 dragon kings of the different cardinal directions. There's also possibly like one dragon king that rules them all, known as Long Wang, which would be spelled Long Wang. Originally, I thought about making Long Wang a major god, but the idea of choosing Long Wang just sounds really silly that ultimately I replaced him with Nuwa. So there is that. Aokuang is kind of like the most famous of the Dragon Kings because he's so present in all the stories. So his god power here is monsoon, a reference to the real weather phenomenon that happens in Eastern Asia. It summons a fierce torrential downpour over a very large area, and that will move towards a specified direction. Allied units under the rainstorm are buffed, and enemy units under the rainstorm are debuffed. So the idea is you can kind of point in a direction, and you want to take your fights all underneath that rainstorm. I think this would be a really cool visual. It would work well in team games, and it's kind of evocative of, say, like the Eclipse power, but instead of affecting the whole map, it's localized to a specific area. So I think there's a lot more interesting gameplay potential from this, and I would love to see something like this in the game. Guan Yu is going to be the hero for Aokuang. Guan Yu is a very, very famous general from the Three Kingdoms period. He is basically in Chinese legend, he's like the most loyal, the epitome of loyalty and chivalry. He's always doing the right thing. As a result, after he died, he became sanctified. He became a saint, or sometimes known as a god of war. And in this game, I wanted to represent him. I wanted to see him in the game. It just made so much sense to have him here, and not just as a god, but rather as a unit that you can actually do something with. He is going to be a heavy infantry hero, and he'll buff nearby Guandaos. The Guandaos are named after Guan Yu because they all wield that kind of green Dragon Crescent Blade, which is this technology here, which grants Guan Dao's splash damage. So I just wanted to make a reference to that. This is the Guan Yu's famous weapon. I mentioned earlier, like Zhang Jun from For Honor is also based on Guan Yu. The Taotia is going to be the myth unit for Ao Kuang, and the Taotia, here represented in Creation of the Gods, is going to be this monster made of bronze that has this really voracious appetite. If any of you guys have seen that god-awful movie called Great Wall that featured Matt Damon, the alien dog monsters that were attacking the Great Wall, those are also Taotia. They're known for having really big mouths, and they want to eat everything, and they don't want to stop. So it makes a lot of sense then that their special ability will be Swallow. This ability will swallow an enemy, allow the Taotia to swallow an enemy unit whole, functionally just killing them. But when the Taotia dies, the enemy unit will pop back out. All the enemy units that he swallows will pop back out. So you're basically you're getting a sort of insta-kill in the short term, but in the long term, those units will come back out. But overall, a very strong and powerful ability for this kind of unit. Ritual Bronzes is a reference to the Shang Dynasty, Zhou Dynasty bronze works that kind of display the Taotia mythological creatures. I would love to see like a kind of bronze face for the designer of this unit. It would be pretty iconic. I think this is already like a pretty good direction to go in with this design. It'll give the Taotia a bronze face mask, and it'll give him an upgrade. And Pillar of the Ocean increases the building health and durability. This is a reference to the Jingu Bang, which is Sun Wukong's like unique quarterstaff weapon. It was actually originally a giant pillar that held up one of Ao Kuang's palaces, and Wukong basically like took that pillar and turned it into his own weapon. And even though he shrunk it down to the size of a regular quarterstaff, it still has the mass of this giant pillar that holds up this ocean. So that's why it's so powerful. So really cool reference there. I think this is also in the extended edition already. Moving on to Shi Wangmu. This is the Queen Mother of the West. The art here is absolutely beautiful, and I would love to see a representation of like, how to say this, like more interesting body types, especially for female characters in Age of Mythology. So many of the gods and goddesses are basically just young and beautiful. So it would be cool to see kind of like this old grandma character, and I think Shi Wangmu kind of fits that identity really well. And here she is associated with her famous peaches of immortality, which is what she's really known for in the stories. She's going to be all about trade and iron pagodas. So while Ao Kuang buffs the Guan Dao, Shi Wangmu will buff iron pagodas, which are the heavy cavalry for the Chinese. Her god power is Orchard of Immortality. So this is the famous orchard that Wukong would steal the peaches from. Shi Wangmu wants to throw a banquet, basically giving some of these peaches to the immortals on Kunlun, and Wukong kind of messes that up. That's what happens in the story, at least. In this god power, it will spawn an orchard, which will provide a resource of your choice, and then villagers can gather from it very quickly. It will, however, run out, so it's not infinite. So this is very similar to how Japanese orchards work from Age of Empires 3, if you're familiar with that. It's just an idea of like helping buff the economy of it helps buff your economy, and it gives you a resource that maybe you don't have map control for, but you can just rely on this to get some of that resource. Lu Bu is going to be the unique hero here. Lu Bu is not a mythological character. He's more of like a legendary general from the Three Kingdoms period, but he's become basically canonized in modern pop mythology when it comes to China because he's so popular in Dynasty Warriors and other representations of the Three Kingdoms period, because he's such a badass. He's like the general that he's like the big bad general antagonist that everyone has to beat. He's such a badass. He's killing everybody. It just makes so much sense to have him in the game. I would love to see him represented, and it also makes a ton of sense to have him as the heavy cavalry hero, because historically he rode Red Hare, the famous red horse, his famous red steed, that actually after he gets killed, Guan Yu would become associated with that. But here I'm making Guan Yu a infantry hero and Lu Bu a cavalry hero. So he's going to be buffing nearby iron pagodas. He is not an iron pagoda historically. They exist in two very different time periods, but I think we're just going to kind of let that slide for now. Moving on to the myth unit here, the Qilin. This is also a mythological creature that was featured in Shang-Chi. It looks kind of like a dragon mixed with a horse or a unicorn. When when the Ming Dynasty sent out the Zhang He expeditions, and they went over to Africa and they discovered giraffes, they thought that giraffes were Qilin, and they actually brought some giraffes back to the emperor, basically to say like, look, we found these mythical creatures in Africa, and this is a representation of like your auspicious rule, a good sign of good fortune, which is like really cool to imagine if you think about it, if you can imagine yourself being in that time period. The special ability here is going to be Skewer. When the Qilin charges, it'll skewer a target with its horn on its head, and it'll carry it forward and ram through a bunch of other units, knocking them back. So just a really cool effect, not necessarily the most mythologically inspired, but I think it makes a ton of sense given this horn, and I think it would be cool to see a unit get skewered in the game. Also, tell me if this doesn't look like kind of like Ponyta from Pokemon. I kind of think of Ponyta when I look at this kind of creature. The technologies for Xiwangmu are Silk Road will buff up your caravans. I wanted to make some kind of reference to Silk Road, and Xiwangmu is the Queen Mother of the West, so it makes sense that she gets some technology related to the West. Mountain Pattern Armor, it will make Iron Pagodas even tankier. I mentioned earlier that Iron Pagodas historically used kind of like a heavy lamellar kind of armor, but Mountain Pattern Armor is very unique to Chinese armor that I wanted to make a reference to it in the technologies here. Mountain Pattern Armor is the reference to these kind of like interesting kind of shape where it's like almost like a triangle style shape. This is a kind of style that you'll see represented in Chinese art often, but there's no modern day, or there's no replica of it that survives to the modern day, and whenever people do make any kind of attempts at recreating this armor, it's not actually very effective. So it's dubious whether or not this was a historical armor at all, or if this was just simply like an artist's representation. So there's a lot of like open historical debate here. What I do know, however, is that this is a very iconic look when it comes to any representation of Chinese fantasy, so it makes a ton of sense to include it in the context of Age of Mythology. Fergana horses can also be called like heavenly horses. This is a reference to basically these amazing horses that were found in the Fergana region, basically far western China, far western Xinjiang area into like Central Asia. All the best horses were developed over there, and the Chinese would take special effort during the Imperial Age to import these horses and use them for their cavalry, and then breed them because they were so beautiful and strong and effective in war. So this will just give Iron Pagodas additional movement speed. Moving on to Hebo. This is the god of the Yellow River. Not a god that I know a lot about until I saw him in Smite, actually. And man, I could not find a better representation of him. I do not like the way he looks in Smite. He looks so dopey. These like weird like spikes coming out of his hands just look so I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. But anyways, he is going to be buffing up farming and warrior monks in the castle in the heroic age. His god power is Great Flood. A fast-moving deluge sweeps away any enemy units in the area towards the targeted direction. So very similar to the god power that Ao Kuang had in the extended edition, but now since it's available in Age 3 instead of Age 4, it's not going to be quite as powerful as what Ao Kuang did. I think Ao Kuang's this god power was kind of broken actually. It like just completely destroyed your enemy civilization, because it also moved buildings originally, I think. I would like this to be a little bit more reasonably balanced since it's available in Age 3. Zhang Ziya is going to be the hero for Hebo, and Zhang Ziya is a very interesting character. He's a very famous character in Chinese mythology. He's one of the protagonists of Investiture of the Gods. He's a fisherman hermit that basically saves the realm by killing Daji, the nine-tailed fox. And here I'm making him a monk hero. He's not really a monk, but I couldn't find a better representation of a monk hero, and Zhang Ziya sort of, he's like a Taoist sage, so it kind of makes sense that he could be the monk hero. This is the closest I could get, at least. So anyways, some representation of Zhang Ziya would be cool to see in this civilization. And Dragon Turtle is going to be the myth unit here. I'm not sure if this unit was seen in the extended edition or if it was just a water unit here in the previous version, but here I want to see a Dragon Turtle as an amphibious myth unit, something that can go both on land and water. It will have a special ability, Taunt, where it will become impervious in its shell, so you can imagine it kind of shrinks into a shell, and it'll pull aggro from all nearby enemies. We haven't seen this kind of taunt ability in Age of Mythology yet, but I feel like it makes so much sense to have this, especially on a turtle type of unit, that I would love to see it. It would make for some really interesting gameplay situations. And The dragon turtle will have a couple upgrades here. First one is Bishi, the towered turtle. So Bishi are these kind of I think he's originally a son of Ao Kuang, actually, this dragon king. But he's often seen in Chinese imagery, kind of carrying like a tower of some sort, or like carrying a stela, or just like various kinds of buildings, maybe a pagoda or something like that. So in this case, this upgrade will make it will upgrade the dragon turtle to now carry a tower on its back. So you can imagine like a tower that kind of shoots arrows while the dragon turtle is moving around. I think that'd be really cool to see. And then the next technology is Ao, the world turtle. So the dragon turtle will now carry a large tower on its back. You can imagine maybe it even shoots rockets or something like that. Maybe even benefits from tower upgrades, where it has like boiling oil for units that are too close to it. That would be awesome to see, and it's a good reference to the turtle that kind of carries the world on its back, which is also part of Chinese mythology. I think originally in the myths, Nuwa actually, I think she chops up the turtle, and like its body becomes like the earth or something like that. I don't know the exact details of it, but I just remember feeling really sorry for the turtle when I read that. Silt deposits is going to be another technology. It's a reference to the Yellow River. Hebo is the god of the Yellow River after all, and it's just a reference to the fertility that the Yellow River brings to the farmland in that region. So it'll improve the farming efficiency in some way. And the Feng Sheng Bang is a technology that was featured in the Investiture of the Gods. Is kind of like this MacGuffin that gives any king, whoever holds onto it, like infinite power, basically. So I just want to make some kind of shout out to that. It is associated with Zhang Ziya after all. But here I'm just saying it'll upgrade warrior monks to warrior sages. I don't have strong opinions on how exactly this should work. This is kind of vague here for me. Okay, finally, we're getting to the Mythic Age. Here are the gods for the Mythic Age: Erlang Shen, Li Jing, and Guan Yin. None of these gods were featured in the extended edition. So for context, up here, I think the only minor god that was not featured in the extended edition already is Houtu, but she had there was a very similar male god that was already representing a very similar thing here. I just kind of replaced it with the female variant. This is where things get kind of controversial. None of these gods are represented in Age of Mythology Extended Edition, but I think that they are some of the most important gods that should be represented. But I can totally understand why there would be some controversy here, and let's discuss that. So Erlang Shen is going to be the first one. This is probably the least controversial one because he is a very important god. He's kind of known as a very righteous and very powerful fighter, and he's famous for having his third eye. He's kind of like all about having this third vertical eye over here. He is also featured in Smite. He's got a dog in that game, so I included a reference to that here with the Celestial Dog, which summons a myth unit dog that can return upon death. And because he's such a good fighter, he uniquely will have a hero that is basically a personification of himself. So Yang Jian is one of his personifications. Here's a representation of Yang Jian. Erlang Shen is very much associated with this kind of tri-tipped spear. Anytime you see the spear kind of shape, you think Erlang Shen. So I want a wuxia style hero because wuxia is such a cool element of Chinese fantasy, and so far we haven't seen any of that in this design yet. So I'm imagining like a very wuxia kind of look for Yang Jian, and Yang Jian will be buffing nearby myth units because this is the kind of like myth unit guy. Now, his ability here will be 72 transformations. So Yang Jian can, in the stories, transform into any kind of creature he wants. So in this case, whenever he gets his power, he will copy the ability of a random myth unit and just start going ham at it. So imagine he like turns into a frost giant and just like breathes frost onto somebody. Imagine he turns into a battleborn and starts knocking everyone around. Imagine he turns into a cyclops and picks someone up and throws them away. I think that would be super cool to see a guy that just like transforms into random myth units. And it ties into his like myth unit buffing mechanic. The nine-tailed fox is going to be the myth unit here, a very, very powerful spirit when it comes to Chinese mythology, and The ability here will be Charm, where the fox will convert an enemy unit. I think that just makes a ton of sense. It's a very powerful ability after all. And the technology Daji's Cauldron will basically upgrade the nine-tailed fox in some way. Daji is kind of like the most famous of the nine-tailed foxes. She is the main antagonist in Investiture of the Gods. She basically corrupted the Shang emperor and brought the entire dynasty to ruin, and had to be killed by Zhang Ziya over here. Lastly, here is the god power. Shenlong is going to be the god power for Erling Shen. Shenlong is such a cool god power. I really want to talk about this. So, Shenlong is the Dragon of Storms. He's a flying myth unit that will shoot beams of lightning from above. So very similar to the Nidhogg in a way. And Shenlong is like he's probably the most iconic like main dragon god in Chinese mythology. Obviously, like Chinese mythology, you expect to see dragons everywhere. I actually took out the Azure Dragon because the Azure Dragon is just a little bit of a weird reference to me. It doesn't feel like a myth unit. It's not something that you would see in the stories necessarily, at least not for me. And the fact that, like, you know, we saw its representation in Age of Mythology Extended Edition, and it just looks so dopey when you have the dragon kind of like crawling on the ground like that. It looks like a giant snake. It's kind of lame, but like if I want to see a Chinese dragon, I want to see it flying in the sky, shooting beams of lightning at people. And as you can imagine, this is the inspiration behind Shenron. That's why I included Shenron's picture here. That's the dragon that grants the wishes in Dragon Ball Z. And then you have King Ghidorah from Godzilla, who's the three-headed dragon that shoots lightning. Obviously, that like dragon shoots lightning, Shenlong. Obviously, the reference is there. And then also Aurelion Sol from League of Legends, who nowadays is kind of like has like kind of like a planet and space theme going on for it. Originally, it was going to be called Ao Shin, I think, was the original name for Aurelion Sol back when it was the first concept, and it was going to be a lightning themed dragon. So obviously, lightning dragon, that's Shenlong. Shenlong is like the lightning dragon when it comes to Chinese mythology. So would love to see this kind of this unit represented in some way by this civilization. The last things I want to call here are the tri-tipped lance. Gives myth units some bonus attack damage. Just a reference to the tri-tipped lance that you always see represented with Erling Shen, and the third eye, which makes myth units cheaper. The thematics, I don't have a strong opinion on what exactly this does. Just like some kind of call out to hit the fact that this guy's the third eye. Moving on to Li Jing, who is the pagoda-bearing god. This guy is not an important god when it comes to the Pantheon, but he is heavily featured in some stories, especially in Journey to the West, because he's got this big, badass pagoda. If you ever show this kind of figure to anyone in China, they will immediately recognize him because it's so iconic. You only have like this one god dude who's like holding a pagoda. You see a guy holding a pagoda, like that's such a weird thing to do. You know it's Li Jing. What he does with this pagoda is he can basically trap people underneath it, and he does that a few times in the story. So that's his power as a god power here, and I think it ties in so thematically well, and it'd be so cool to see this particular god power. Enemy units in the targeted area are sucked inward, and the heavenly pagoda is erected on top of them, capturing them. The opponent can then release the trapped units only if they destroy the pagoda. So basically, it traps a bunch of units. It's almost similar to the Taotia over here, where you have a unit that kind of swallows enemy units whole, but then if the Taotia dies, then the units pop back out. So this is kind of similar. It's almost like the implode ability for Atlas for the Atlanteans, where it sucks a bunch of units in, but now the units are stuck there until that building is destroyed. So it basically creates a new target for your enemy to focus on, and obviously you can balance around how tanky this heavenly pagoda is to actually destroy it later on. Nezha is the hero for Li Jing, and to be honest with you, Li Jing was not like my first pick for a Chinese god. He basically took the spot of Chongli from the extended edition. Chongli's like the fire god, also known as Zhurong, and Li Jing is kind of fire associated, so you can kind of see him like kind of occupying that same slot. But the real reason why I have him here is because of Nezha. Nezha is like one of like the biggest heroes when it comes to Chinese mythology. In fact, these are the big three. I would say like Sun Wukong, who we're going to be talking about last here, Nezha, and then Yang Jian or Erling Shen. These are like the big three most powerful heroes, and it just wouldn't make sense to see them represented in the game in any other way when it comes to Chinese mythology. Like if they were just minor gods, it would be lame because all you're doing is just worshiping them. You can't actually see them in game. And if they were like myth units, it just wouldn't make sense. So like, this is where this idea came from. I wanted to see Ne Zha and Sun Wukong and Yang Jian as heroes, and then that's every element of this design kind of like stemmed from there. So Ne Zha is the androgynous son of Li Jing, so this is actually a boy, not a girl, even though famously he looks very girly. He will buff nearby siege units, so just like how Yang Jian buffs myth units, Ne Zha buffs siege units, and Ne Zha has an ability called Wind and Fire Dash. This is a reference to the Wind and Fire wheels. He kind of hovers over these kind of fire wheels in the mythology. He will quickly dash to his target, leaving a trail of fire behind him that will hurt enemies. Very cool, very iconic look. I think it makes a ton of sense. The Feng Huang is going to be the myth unit for Li Jing. This is a phoenix, conjures a firestorm on enemies below. Doesn't do the egg thing. Chinese phoenixes don't revive. That's more of like a Western thing. This unit used to be called the Vermilion Bird back in Age of Mythology Extended Edition, and I changed it to Feng Huang just because Vermilion Bird is quite a mouthful and just sounds kind of lame. Feng Huang feels more unique to me, and that's it. Historically, Feng Huang and Vermilion Bird are not the same thing, but they overlap so much in their identity that I think it's okay to kind of make that mistake here. And the inspiration behind the Pokemon Ho-Ho is actually the Feng Huang. Ho-Ho is like this fire bird that's very colorful. You can see the obvious parallels here. The technologies here, Vermilion Bird is an upgrade for Feng Huang. I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not this should actually be called Vermilion Bird, but some kind of upgrade maybe. Demon Mirror is a reference to Li Jing, has a demon mirror that he uses to banish some demons sometimes. This will buff gunpowder units in some way. Wind and Fire Wheels is a reference to Ne Zha's fire wheels here, and it'll make siege units move faster. So a lot of siege related buffs. Okay, lastly, moving on to Guan Yin. Guan Yin is probably the most controversial god on the roster, or goddess. And I saved the best for last here. So Guan Yin, the reason why it's so controversial to include here is that Guan Yin is very much an actively, like a lot of these gods are kind of a part of active religion, but Guan Yin more than most, because Guan Yin is the only god here that comes from the Buddhist pantheon. Most of these gods come from Taoist or more traditional pantheon. Guan Yin is distinctly a Buddhist figure, and modern day, in modern times, Buddhism just has a little bit more of a hold, I think, on the psyche of a lot of Chinese, especially diaspora. The Chinese mainland because of the Communist Revolution, a lot of people became atheistic, but in the Chinese diaspora, there's still a lot of people who believe in these kinds of religions. So it's very weird to include her here. And Guan Yin has not really been represented in other games before, but she has been represented in a lot of popular media. So there's some like middle ground here where perhaps she could be represented. In my opinion, if she was a major god, because she could be a candidate, she's such an important goddess in Chinese mythology that she could really be a candidate for a major god. If she was a major god, and then represented in like the Chinese imagery for the civilization, I think that would be a little bit too much. But if she's a minor god, where you just see kind of this portrait of her, it's relatively okay. That to me feels more tasteful of representation of her, and she's just such an important character in Chinese mythology that it's like, it wouldn't feel complete without representing her here. One of the reasons why she is so important, at least when it comes to the mythological stories, at least for me, is when it comes to Journey to the West, the story of Sun Wukong, Guan Yin is kind of like the Athena of that story. She's the main goddess that kind of comes in and helps out the heroes, and anytime they're struggling with anything, she kind of comes down from heaven and like guides them in some way. So it just makes a ton of sense to have her associated with Sun Wukong here. So Guan Yin's thing is going to be the hero units, and Sun Wukong is the hero. He's the Monkey King. He's the famous guy. He's featured in so many things. He's the inspiration behind Goku. You know him, you love him. This picture is from the 1980s version of the show that represents Journey of the West. Very famous. Most Chinese people will recognize this particular representation of Sun Wukong. This is kind of what people are thinking when they think Sun Wukong. And he will be buffing nearby heroes. So Ne Zha buffs siege units, Yang Jian buffs myth units, Wukong buffs heroes. So his special ability is Magic Hair. He can pluck a hair from his body and create a clone of Wukong, which has the same exact hero bonuses, but the clone cannot also pluck clones out of himself. So there's a little bit of balancing there. But what this means is that Wukong can essentially create a hero army out of himself over time, which would be really, really cool and kind of hilarious to see. This also ties in nicely with the other technologies here, Zhubajie and Sha Wujing, who are in the stories. These are his Wukong's companions during the journey to the west. They're all working together to basically protect this dude Tang Sanzang to get to the west and pick up some Buddhist relics over there. Yeah, having these guys as additional heroes that kind of join the roster if you worship Guanyin makes a ton of sense to me. Sha Wujing would wield kind of this monk spade, which is a very unique looking weapon, and also he's a fish spirit hero. I didn't know that. I thought he just like looked some demon looking dude, but he's actually a fish spirit. And Zhubajie is obviously a pig spirit, and he famously wields this kind of metal rake over here. The god power here is also so thematic. I would love to see this represented in the game. Palm of the Buddha is what I'm calling it. It is a reference to the Buddha, which again is going to be touchy because Buddhism is a very practiced world religion to this day. But the palm of the Buddha is basically a meme when it comes to Chinese media because it's seen so often. So in the main story, in Journey to the West, Wukong's basically this trickster god. He's making a ton of mischief in heaven and like absolutely plaguing this guy's heavenly court and destroying all kinds of stuff. So this guy eventually goes over to Buddha and appeals to him for help. And Buddha comes down and basically shows Wukong his power. And at one point, he basically comes down with his hand and just crushes Sun Wukong with his hand. But his hand turns out to be a mountain. And Wukong is essentially crushed underneath this giant mountain, pinning him where he gets stuck there for thousands of years until he finally gets released to go help Tang Sanzang make his journey to the west. So it makes for a really compelling story. But this palm of the Buddha, like mountain crushing thing, has kind of become a huge meme in kung fu movies. If you ever seen Kung Fu Hustle, at some point Stephen Chow's character goes into heaven and uses his palm to like crush is the main bad guy in that story. That's all evoking this same trope here. And it is an amazing trope. You see it so much in Chinese media. I would love to see it represented in Age of Mythology as well. It just makes so much sense to have this be the god power for Guanyin and the god power that's associated with the Wukong. So in this case, a mountain will crash down from the sky, will crush your opponents. And I don't know what exactly that means. Maybe it like stuns them or pins them down or just like destroys all the buildings in that area. Maybe it's like a giant meteor instead of just like a bunch of giant meteors the way Thoth has. It's just like one giant mountain meteor or a giant hand or something like that. There's a lot of different ways you could represent this and a lot of different things that they could do. This little image I have here comes from a movie that shows like Wukong kind of resisting the palm of the Buddha. Such a cool animation. If I have enough energy, I'll try to pull up that clip and overlay it here while I'm talking, and you guys can check it out yourselves because it is so badass. Like when you see the palm coming down, like you see the cellular structure of the hand coming down, and that's what Wukong has to try to actually stop. It's an amazing imagery. The Gate Guardian is the myth unit. So if you've ever been to a Chinese temple, you walk inside and you look to the left or the right. Actually, this also exists in Japanese temples. You look to the left and you look to the right, and there's these giant, like, badass looking guardian dudes. This is what I'm referring to when I say Gate Guardian. So there's a few different names for these guys, but one name I found for them is Menshen, which basically means like door god. There's a few other representations of these, and there's also a few representations of these in like Hindu mythology and Japanese mythology. These are such an iconic piece of Chinese temples that I just feel like it makes a ton of sense. I would love to see like a badass like demonic ogre wielding a giant halberd or something like that, maybe evocative of the four heavenly kings even, and so you can imagine like these are kind of like a giant unit. So it's like every civ has kind of like a big dude and in the Age 4. So like the Greeks have the Colossus and the Norse have the giants. The Atlanteans have the Hecagigantus, which I think are now called Santimanus. The Gate Guardian would be kind of like the Chinese like big dude. It's not quite a Titan, but it's like a big dude. And in this case, I would love to see also these like flowing robes. Like these kind of flowing robes is such a unique imagery to Chinese like mythology, and I don't know if there's like another way you can see this right now in and anything else in this roster. So we'd love to see myth units with like these kind of badass robes. The special ability here is Battle Cry. The Guardian will roar loudly, stomp the ground, and knock back all nearby enemy units. So a little bit similar to the Sentimanus. It's a AoE knockup ability. I think it would look really cool to see something like this. It's also kind of similar to the triangle ability for Lu Bu in Dynasty Warriors. If you guys have played Dynasty Warriors before, something very similar to that as well. This technology, Heavenly Kings, is a reference to the 4 Heavenly Kings I just showed you guys. It will upgrade the Gate Guardians to Heaven's Guardians, so a reference to that. And Golden Circlet is the circlet that Sun Wukong wears on his head. He's not wearing it here, but Wukong famously wears this golden circlet, which basically controls him, is used to control him by the monk Tang Sanzang, and this will just make hero units respawn faster and have more health. I don't have a strong opinion beyond that. Just something maybe related to the golden circlet would be cool. Okay, I am losing my breath. The last things I want to say with this design, I can't believe I just went through all this. I'm so tired right now. The additional notes I want to add here are other gods and heroes and units that didn't quite make the cut. So I just want to briefly give a mention to that. First off is Doumu, the Queen of Heaven. I didn't include her ultimately. She was a candidate for being a major god. And she's got a really cool and interesting story, but I don't know how popular she is. I have not heard of her until I did research for this concept, and I don't see her in any of the major stories, or at least not much. She's also commonly associated with Shi Wangmu oftentimes. Like a lot of the mother goddesses are kind of blend together in the stories. So I'm not sure if Domu's like actually much of a thing. Bisha is another like amalgamation of mother goddesses that could be a major god. I feel like Nuwa kind of like fits that trope already, and Bisha to me is more like Shangdi, which is more like it feels more like a title than a specific god. So I don't know. I feel like these gods are like, they could fit. Maybe they could be a DLC civilization down the line. But for now, I did not decide to include them. For minor gods, Zhurong, the god of fire, who's known as Chongli in Age of Mythology Extended Edition, very good candidate for being a minor god. Would love to see him again in maybe a future DLC version. Chiyo and Yandi, especially Chiyo, is a really great antagonistic god, like an evil guy. Chiyo almost holds a similar position as like Ravan from what was it called? The Ramanyan in Hindu mythology, where like he's kind of like the big evil bad god that gets defeated by the hero. I think by Huangdi originally, but I might be getting my mythologies mixed up. He's got a bunch of arms, he's got a bunch of weapons, and he's kind of like a big scary dude. So it would be cool to see something like this represented. For other heroes that I didn't include here, Zhuge Liang, and also known as Kong Ming. He, as mentioned before, the Zhuge Nu are named after him. He is this very famous strategist. Anyone who's played Three Kingdoms, Total War, or Dynasty Warriors will be intimately familiar with him because he's such an important character in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Would love to see him represented. He's not quite mythology, just like Lu Bu and like Guan Yu feel a little bit out of place with this design. He's not quite in the Taoist canon, at least, but he's so iconic in the Chinese like pop mythology that it would feel amiss to not have him referenced in some way. Yue Fei is another general that would be worth considering. Yue Fei is kind of like, I see him as like the George Washington of China. He's like the father of Chinese nationalism back during the Song Dynasty, and he's like one of the most important Chinese generals in history, famous for basically defending against the invading Jurchens from the north, and he also got like, I don't know. There's so many stories associated with him. It would make a lot of sense. He's more of a historical figure though, not really like a mythological character. So for that reason, I didn't quite include him here, but definitely also worth consideration. Water Margin. Water Margin is one of the other main like legendary fictional stories that is really popular in China. We have Journey to the West, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Water Margin. There was one more I think that I don't quite remember, or I think. Was it Investiture of the Gods was the fourth one? I'm not sure. But like Water Margin is also another really popular story in Chinese pop mythology, it would be cool to see some of those characters represented as well. But none of them were quite famous enough, especially for a Western audience, that I felt like it would fit in this design. Like pretty much every single character I included here, even though like, if you guys are coming from a Western perspective, I'm sure a lot of you guys might not have heard of a lot of these gods or heroes, but like these guys are all some of the like the most basic, most famous, like everybody knows these kinds of characters type of thing. Like that's what I picked here. Like if you are from the West, you should know these characters. They're as famous as Hercules and Perseus and Jason and the Argonauts and Atalanta and Chiron and Odysseus. Like these are on the same level as those characters. I'm not picking the more obscure heroes for the most part. And lastly, for other considerations of myth units, we have Pishu, which is a lion griffin type of unit that you did see in Age of Mythology Extended Edition, but I felt like the implementation there was a little bit lacking. So, and I feel like this kind of creature just kind of doesn't seem that unique or interesting compared to a lot of the other creatures. We already have the Qilin and the Taotie who kind of like fulfill almost a similar kind of role. So having the dragon turtle or something else would like be a lot more unique, I think, compared to having the Pishu. And then the Yao Guai is another character. This is not a Fallout creature, actually. It is just a generic term for like a monster in Chinese mythology, but I would use this word to encapsulate the various half animal, half humanoid demons that you see in Chinese mythology, whether they have a bull head or a fox head or a wolf head or a dog head or whatever head. There's all kinds of like Chinese mythological characters that just have like animal features, but they're like a human demon type of dude that fights. You could see this kind of unit existing as well potentially, but I chose not to go with it because it's a little bit too generic and I would rather see these other myth units represented. Okay, I think that's it. I think I did it. Holy shit. Oh my god, my throat is gonna give out on me. This has been a ton of fun to talk about. This has been a ton of fun to design. I don't know how many of you guys actually made it to the end of this video. If you did, hopefully you learned something or at least kind of understood how I'm thinking about the Chinese design for Age of Mythology. I'm really hoping to see a design that looks more like this when the DLC Civ eventually comes out. I really hope that they don't stick with the original extended edition design, because there's just so many things in that design that are just lacking the flavor and the color that I know Chinese mythology is capable of. My hope is that like you will agree with me that this design with all these popular heroes and colorful characters and god powers and stuff like that just makes so much more sense. Especially like, oh my god, like the palm of the Buddha, Sun Wukong as a hero, it just makes so much sense that like it really scratches that nostalgia itch for like how Chinese mythology is popularly imagined. And you know, of course, at least by me, like the caveat here is everything is just how I'm imagining the pop mythology, and maybe I have a totally wrong perspective about it. Maybe you have a better perspective, maybe you're more educated on this. I would love to hear it. Tell me how I'm wrong, tell me what you agree with, what you disagree with, in the comments below. Let's start a discussion. Anything we can do to help improve the design of the Chinese civilization when it eventually comes out, I'm a huge fan of that. That if you guys enjoyed this and you want to see more stuff like this from me, I might do the Persian Pantheon or the Aztec Pantheon or the Japanese Pantheon next, or the Celts for that matter, or the Yoruba. Oh god, it'd be so cool to see the Yoruba in the game. Definitely like and subscribe and comment, engage with me, and that will be very encouraging for me to make another video like this. I don't make these videos necessarily for the engagement because I don't think this is going to be the most popular topic, but it's just so much fun to do, and I'm really hoping to see something like this. Hopefully something like this can speak to the developers in some way or speak to the designers of the game and influence their decision making in some way. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for listening, guys. That's all from me. Stay frosty, stay chilly.